Hello again, and welcome to another lecture. This time on inquiry-based learning, and this is the first part of it. So, what do you know about this approach? Inquiry-based learning. What do you know about this approach? Right? To help you with, tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. Again, let's read together. Tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. What do you understand from this old saying? The word involve could mean a lot of things, right? But in inquiry-based learning, we could assume that it means being included. And that's the essence of this approach, being included. And we're going to find out how. Okay? How would anyone be involved in this type of approach? Okay. So including your learners more actively in every activity will lead to more potential understanding of any concept you would like to teach them. Well, that's my personal idea and personal opinion. Do you agree? Well, instead of just them taking in the things that you tell them, is it not better to have a more dynamic classroom situation where everybody could express their ideas? You might be skeptical right now, but let's wait and take a look at what we have for today, and then we'll go from there. Let's see if you will agree or disagree with me in the end. All right, so before going deeper on this topic, I want to show you the list of the things that we're going to encounter here. We'll be discussing about a lot of things, as you can see, related to inquiry-based learning in a total of 2 videos. So this would be the first part, as I had mentioned. The second part, we're going to deal with the rest of the list. Since this is the first part, we'll be exploring on the basics. So I hope you will be able to gain knowledge on what inquiry-based learning is, get to know the different models and the cycle of inquiry, and also on the types of questions. So buckle up and let's get started. Do you have any idea what inquiry-based learning is? I already asked earlier. What do you think is inquiry-based learning? Well, we can simply define inquiry-based learning as seeking information or knowledge through questioning. It's a simple enough definition, right? So when we ask a question, more often than not, we get an answer. Is it not? Well, depends on the question you ask, right? Also, in this type of learning, learners are encouraged to explore the material, ask questions, and share their ideas regarding a question they are given or they have chosen. Okay, so these are 2 of the simplest definition of inquiry-based learning. In other words, inquiry-based learning is a form of active learning that starts by posing questions or problems or scenarios and then seeking the answers or solutions to these. It contradicts traditional education, which generally relies on the teacher presenting facts and their own knowledge about the subject, right? Now that we basically know what this approach is about, let's get to know more of the other things related to it. So first, we'll take a look at the modals of inquiry. Okay, so we have 4 models. The first one is structured. Next is what we call controlled. Sorry. Then we have guided. And then we have the last one, which we call the free inquiry. All right, so structured, controlled, guided, and free inquiry. These are the 4 models of inquiry. Okay, and that's what we're going to discuss first this time. So, sorry. While we talk about each model, I want you to see how different they are from each other regarding the amount of influence or control that both the teachers and students have in each area. Okay, so I'll be presenting you charts later on. And what I want you to do is to see how different they are regarding the control or the amount of influence that the teacher and the learners or the students have in each factor or area given in the chart. Can you do that? Then, let's proceed. First, we have the structured inquiry. This model is perfect for a teacher new to inquiry, since this structure is mostly controlled by the teacher, from the essential questions to the performance task. So in this model, the students mainly follow the lead of the teacher. Next, in controlled inquiry, although the teacher prepares the questions and resources, the students are given liberty to choose which questions they would like to study and which resources they want to use in studying that question. We can still see some control from the teacher on some factors here. All right. So I hope you can see how different it is from structured inquiry. In the third model, the guided inquiry, the teacher gives more choice to the students. So in addition to others, students can now choose how they want to present their learning. Okay, so they can choose a question, they can choose the resources, they can also choose how they want to present their learning or their output. So far, in the 3 models we finished, it was on the teacher to create essential questions and find resources and express how students should showcase their learning. However, in the free inquiry model, the students collect and design everything. It's free inquiry, right? So they are given total freedom. Okay, so what does the teacher do? The teacher now serves as the facilitator and the students, the master of their learning. So we can now see how much of the process were entrusted to the learners. All right, I'm back. Have you done the task I asked you to do? What was it again? All right, so I asked you to compare, while we discuss, I asked you to compare how different the models are, okay, in terms of the control or influence the teacher and the students or learners have in each model, right? Okay, so, all right, structured. In the structured, there is no student control at all, right? Okay, but then in the free inquiry, it was totally free. So the choices were given to the students, and they were the ones who chose for themselves from the question until how they will present their output. Okay, so the control of the teacher in the process was gradually relinquished or given to the students. The more mastery they gain in using the strategies, the more choices and freedom given to them. Okay, so that's how different the four models of inquiry are. Are you still with me? So far, we had finished until the models. So next, we'll take a look at the cycle of inquiry. So why do we call it a cycle anyway? What's the definition of cycle? A cycle means it goes round and around. It's never ending, right? So why do we call it cycle of inquiry? Because a question could lead to another question, right? It is a never-ending process. Here you can see 5 points in the cycle. So what do you think are the steps in this cycle? What could be step number 1? Well, the initial step is ask. Okay, the first step to any inquiry is to ask. The construction of a question or set of questions is the beginning of the cycle. Depending on the type of inquiry or the model of inquiry, the question can come from the teacher or from the learners, right? In a structured model of inquiry, the question will be chosen by the teacher. But in a free inquiry, right, or in a guided and free inquiry, the question could be chosen by the learners. All right, so that's the first step, ask. Once a question is decided, learners are encouraged to investigate the topic by looking into information, which could be provided and chosen by the teacher or decided on by the learners themselves. Again, depending on the model of inquiry. Okay, so ask, investigate, step 2. What's step 3? After enough information is gathered, it is then organized or outlined. Okay, so that's the third step. This allows the learners to filter the information which are helpful in solving the problem. That is the create step. Okay, that means they're going to start formulating answers. Okay, they will start formulating answers to the question after they investigated. Okay, so we are down to 3 steps already. Step 1 is ask. Step 2 is investigate. Step 3 is to create. Next, the information gathered is then discussed. That is the 4th step. It is discussed and analyzed for further filtering. Okay, so after information is gathered, they're going to discuss, analyze, and filter those information. The teacher can direct the discussion and highlight the implications that arise from the investigation and show how it relates to the solution of the problem. That is, okay, if it is a structured and controlled inquiry. All right, so the teacher will be helping them. Okay, the filtered information then is discussed and analyzed further for finalization. Okay, the teacher can direct the discussion. And then we have the last step, the conclusion. Conclusions are then made to the original question. Conclusions means the answer or the solution to that question or problem. Furthermore, student reflection is encouraged to retrace and analyze their steps while answering the posed question. So this also serves as reinforcement for them to internalize the process. Okay? In conclusion, it's not only giving the answer. All right? Self-reflection is also encouraged so that they can look back to their steps and their process, what they did. or how did they get to that solution? And from there, they restart the process. They pose a question, they investigate, they create solutions or initial solutions from those information they gathered. Then they discuss, okay? They discuss and filter the information and then conclude. And then again. Right. So those are the steps in the cycle of inquiry. Is everyone okay? Then there's no reason not to continue with our next topic. The next one is on the type of questions. So we need to have an idea about this thing or these things because it is a part of our main topic, the inquiry-based approach to learning. Okay, so how many types of questions do you think are there? How many types of questions do you think are there? The major types or important types of questions. Perhaps you have learned this in your English classes. Okay, how many? We're going to talk about the 8 types of questions. Were you right with your guess? All right, so one by one, we're going to define, and give examples on the 8 types of questions. Could be the first one. All right, so closed questions, open questions, probing questions, leading questions, loaded questions, funnel questions, recall and process questions, and rhetorical questions. Are you familiar with any of these types of questions? Okay. Now, just like what I always ask you to do in my lectures, I want you to try and follow well and see how different they are from one another. And perhaps create your own questions for each type as well, yeah? Good luck. Let's start. Number 1, we have the closed question, aka polar questions, okay? Closed questions. Generally, it invite a one-word answer such as yes or no. Have you eaten? Yes, no. Could also include answers to factual or multiple choice questions. Factual, that means the answer is a fact. Okay, what could be an example for that, a factual question? Oh, okay. For example, when you ask somebody about where they're from. So, are you from the Philippines? Yes, I am. Or, where are you from? I'm from the Philippines. I'm from Korea. Or multiple choice questions. Multiple choice, that would mean you are given several choices. Okay, multiple. Could mean 2 or 3 or more choices to a question. All right, like, where would you want to travel to? A, South Korea. B, somewhere in Europe. C, Canada. D, New Zealand. Multiple choices. Okay, and this means this question has a definite answer. Right. The closed questions can also be asked to identify a certain piece of information. Again, with a limited set of answers. For example, what's your name? What time do you usually sleep? Are you a student? Right. Since these are simple and easy questions, it is good for warm-up discussions since it invites participation in getting quick answers. Okay, that's the first type of question. Number 2, we have the open questions, which is the opposite of the first one, closed. So require a little more thought and generally encourage wider discussion and elaboration. It's open. can be answered with a simple yes or no response. Because as it says there, it requires elaboration and discussion. By contrast to closed questions, open questions allow for much longer responses and therefore potentially more creativity and information. Okay, we have probing questions. Probing, what's the meaning? What does probing mean? So probing questions, these questions are useful for gaining clarification and encouraging others to tell you more information about a subject. Okay, you probe. You give several questions so you can gain or you can gather more information. Usually, okay, a series of questions that dig deeper and provide a fuller picture. Those are probing questions. Okay. For example, when do you do your homework? Does your mom need to remind you about it? Why? Why not? Okay. All right. It is useful for seeing the bigger picture, encouraging a speaker to tell you more information, and also avoiding misunderstandings because you ask more questions so things are clearer. Right. The fourth type, we have the leading questions. It is designed to lead the respondent or the one who's answering towards a certain desired positive or negative route and sometimes can be coercive. Coercive means it's forced. That is why it's called leading question. Okay. However, be careful in using this type of question since it may seem that you are leading them to say what you wanted to hear. As it was said earlier, it could be a positive or negative route, right? Anyway, these questions are good for building positive discussions. Positive discussions, okay? Closing a sale. If you're a salesperson, use this often. Steering a conversation towards an outcome that serves your interest. That's why it's leading. It leads you. Usually you use it so it will lead you to the answer that you want. Okay, next we have the loaded questions. Why do we call it loaded? Is there something in these questions? Okay, so loaded questions are seemingly straightforward, closed questions. Straightforward, okay, with a twist. They contain an assumption about the respondent or the one who's answering the question. Okay. These questions are quite rightly seen as manipulative. Of course, because there is an assumption about that person responding. Now, who uses this? This type of questions are famously used by lawyers and journalists to trick their interviewee into admitting into something that they do not confess in a normal situation. Oh, that's bad. Right? So if you've watched some perhaps lawyer dramas or journalist interviews, perhaps you could see some examples of these questions. Okay, so you could use this type of question in discovering facts about someone who would otherwise be reluctant to offer up the information. Okay, so they might accidentally tell you something that they don't want to discuss, okay, or give up because of this type of questions. Okay. All right. Sixth is funnel question. As you gather from its name, these questions begin broadly before narrowing. Do you know what a funnel is? Okay, a funnel has a shape like this. Okay, so it begins with a broad question and then it slowly narrows to a specific point. Or it could also start inverted way. So, narrow question to broad questions. Okay. For example, when we meet someone for the first time, we start with closed questions like the name, the job, hometown, and other specific details, right? Okay. As we grow accustomed to each other, we try to ask questions in broader sense, such as their job description or how they spend their weekend. So that's inverted. Narrow questions or closed questions to broader questions. Okay, so this type of question is useful for building relationship, since you can ask several questions, and also in discovering specific information and stopping argument. Because you can go in a broad way. Broad questions. Okay, next, recall and process questions. Questions can be categorized by whether they are recall, or that means it requires something to be remembered or recalled, or process, requiring some deeper thought and analysis. So recall and process questions. And this type of question usually uses WH and H questions. For example, what's 7 times 7? Or where did you put your keys? What's your login password? Okay. So you can utilize this type when encouraging critical thought and in-depth evaluation of a subject in tests, interviews, or discussions. Okay, so you either recall an information, okay, or a fact, or you can talk about the process or analysis of something. All right, lastly, we have rhetorical. Rhetorical questions don't really require an answer. Or, okay, it may have an obvious answer, okay, or cannot be answered at all. All right, so these are statements phrased as questions to make the conversation more engaging for the listener, who is drawn into agreeing with the speaker. In other words, someone asks this type of question without expecting an answer, because the question might not have an answer, or it might have an obvious answer. For example, what is the meaning of life? Can you answer that question? What is the meaning of life? Or, is rain wet? Can dogs bark? The last one certainly has, of course, a definite answer, right? An obvious answer. Yes, they do, unless they are sick or they cannot physically. Okay, so this question is better used when persuading people and building engagement. Okay. All right, so done with another list. Were you able to differentiate the type of questions? I hope you were able to understand how different they are from each other, and hope you were not confused. Okay, so we are done with our list for this lecture. To conclude, okay, in addition to the one we just finished, the types of questions, we also talked about what inquiry-based learning is, and then the 4 models of inquiry, and lastly, the cycle of inquiry. Congratulations for staying with me until the end. And I hope you learned something out of our lecture for this time. That would be it for this part on inquiry-based learning. Remember, a dynamic class is a better learned class. See you in part 2.